Welcome to the Spaghetti Wall podcast, where we dive into life.
Both the messy parts and the moments of joy, and everything in between. I'm Jason Wilcox, licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Dr. Thaen Saelee, a licensed clinical psychologist.
You know, if you don't listen to this episode fully, you're really going to hurt our feelings.
Oh gosh, Jason, that sounds like you're guilt tripping me.
That would be a guilt trip on the nose. So we're going to talk about passive-aggressive communication, which is the type of communication where guilt trips land. There are 4 different types of communication. There's assertive, there's passive, aggressive, and passive-aggressive. So we're going to talk about passive-aggressive, but normally where we want to be is we want to be speaking assertively when we talk with people, especially when we're talking with our partners.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to know when we are stuck in a pattern of being passive aggressive, kind of agreeing on the outside with what our partner's saying, but internally we're unconsciously or consciously scheming against that plan or that goal or that task. And so I think it's really important for us to understand what is passive aggressive communication.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that fit into it. If you ever give a guilt trip, you try to manipulate someone. If you try to gaslight someone, if you're slamming doors or saying yes to something and then not doing it when you said yes, but you're refusing to do it without saying anything, those things are all moving into the passive aggressive category.
I think an easy way that I can break these things down is like knowing that aggressive is it's just all about what I want and I'm just going to steamroll you, right? So
Yep.
passive is it's all about what you want and I'm not going to voice what I want. Like your needs are like ahead and I'm just going to be very passive and like in the background. My needs are in the background. Passive aggressive is I'm gonna smile and agree to your needs while I'm secretly trying to meet my own needs. And then assertive is like we both have needs and I'm gonna articulate and communicate with you on how we can work on that to where we both can, be heard and come to a compromise or not a compromise, but just having clear communication about I hear your needs, I have needs too, and let's communicate about that.
Yeah, it's making sure that both of us have our needs in some way, shape met, or we're at least looking for that.
So that's just how I break down the 4 communication style.
Yeah, and if we go back to passive aggressive, it's a manipulative way to communicate with people because what you're doing is you're going to try to impact their emotions, their mental state, some way, somehow, to either drive home some type of pain for the person or to manipulate them somehow by that emotional pain.
I can see what you're saying when it comes to maybe someone who's more aggressive, right? Because you're kind of speaking to the aggressor. If you see that this person is telling you yes when obviously they mean no, and they're someone who's historically is passive or passive aggressive, you might use these tactics unconsciously to get your way,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's one of those things. It doesn't mean that you know that you're being passive aggressive. Some people speak that way and have no idea that's what they're doing. It's just the way that they were trained to talk. It's how they advocate for themselves, and they just don't realize that they're doing passive aggressive communication. But I don't think we've touched on why this is so important. And the reality is why it's so important is if we're passive aggressive with our partner, it's going to tear down the relationship because it doesn't feel good for someone to do passive aggressive communication with you.
No, and I would imagine someone who's aggressive all the time may feel like they only get their needs met when they're being this way also. So I think it's not good for the perpetrator who's also always aggressively getting their way. Yeah, I think it tears down the bond and the connection. It also tears down trust and being able to be honest and not feel threatened in that honesty and being genuine. And a lot of times people develop resentment, right? Because they aren't being heard. Things aren't really being said honestly. Things are being tiptoed around.
Yeah, and that often happens. If someone has a partner that does a lot of passive aggressive communication, they're probably going to start feeling like they're walking on eggshells because they're always watching out because they don't know where this emotional pain is all of a sudden going to come into the conversation or the actions.
Here's a really common example, and we hear it all the time, and we probably pass it on as a regular statement. But my wife made me come to this party. When I hear my wife made me, my husband made me, my mom made me, my dad made me, my friend made me, I always pause to go, now what does that tell me about this person and what they're conveying about why they're here? You know,
Didn't you make me come on this podcast? Teasing.
I made him I made him do this podcast,
Totally made me do this
right?
podcast.
So we often question, right? Someone who may be thinking, wow, or been trained that that statement is very passive aggressive. Like this person is trying to convey their unwillingness to come to this party and yet conveying it in a way that's passive aggressive. I would even say it's like kind of even a slight to the partner.
Correct. And that's what makes it passive aggressive. Again, it's like that little knife to the back because they're basically conveying it was not cool that you made me come here and I'm putting the responsibility on you and somehow you're in the bad light now because you made me, which
Hmm.
is that whole conveyance, that underlying meaning there doesn't feel good.
No, oftentimes it's important. I pause, when things like this come up in therapy to go like, Why did you choose to go?" Right? And really uplift that value. Oh, I'm here to support my partner, right? Oh, I'm here to, just like mingle. I'm here for the food. Like whatever it is, it could be more kind and nonviolent than my wife made me come or my husband made me come.
And this is where assertive communication is really important because if you didn't really want to go, but it could have been a conversation ahead of time where you could have explained that, hey, this is something I don't want to do, or these are my concerns around it. Can we find a way around my concerns and have an open dialogue?
Yeah, sometimes the reason is I just don't want to go. And that's good enough of a reason not to want to go. I often find myself struggling with what I ought to do and what I feel obligated to do and what's expected of me in this role to this person. So if my partner's saying, "Oh, this office party means a lot to me and I really want to go," and I don't want to go, maybe I'm torn between all these things, right? And I end up being passive aggressive. And my intention is not that. So, what this builds and compounds on is, I think the point I'm making is once we start, sometimes that becomes the pattern of engagement. So, it's not just one time, there's another incident, there's another event. And we just keep doing this again and again and again. And my question often is, what does it get us?
Resentment, frustration, hurt feelings, anger. Again, it divides a relationship. It'll put tension into a relationship and start putting fractures into it.
I will have people tell me, "Well, if what's alternative? I don't have a choice. I have to do this."
That's where you go back to assertive communication.
Mhm.
You speak your truth. And sometimes I get clients who say, well, yeah, but if I do that, my partner is going to get mad or upset or passive aggressive with me, or they're going to get emotionally activated. And I bring up the fact, another skill that we won't dive into here, but it's recognizing that that's your partner's emotions, though, and you don't need to take responsibility for them. When we're assertive, using assertive communication, and someone has a reaction to that, it's okay they have a reaction. It's important not to internalize or take responsibility to the reaction. Assertive communication isn't what caused the reaction. It's something within the person that's causing the reaction.
Mhm. Right. So can we sit with that uncomfortable situation? Though it is uncomfortable, it is not the end all of the relationship. A lot of people believe that if I stop doing that, then something bad's going to happen.
If you stop doing what?
If I stop saying yes to these parties,
Hmm.
if I don't show up with my partner, then it's going to mean something. And then there's, this uncomfortable, I guess, emotional retaliation.
Which would be passive aggressive
Mm-hmm.
from our partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a fine line here because I know when I have these kind of conversations with clients, I'll get the question asked, well, shouldn't I go? I mean, isn't it the right thing to do to go with my partner to show him I love him and be there and care about him? And what I normally try to do is divide two things here. One, if you don't want to go and there is no desire, you're going to be resentful and angry. Then it's important you just express you don't want to go and don't go. On the flip side of that, if you have emotions around it going, yeah, I don't want to go, but I want to show up for my partner, that's different. You're not going to have the resentments. You may not care for the thing you're doing, but yeah, it is kind and nice and loving when we say, hey, I'm going to show up for my partner and I'm going to be there. But again, the difference that I'm highlighting here is one, you're going with a positive attitude, knowing it's something you don't really care for, don't really want to do, but you're doing it for your partner. And the other one is you're going with resentment, anger, frustration, because you feel like you can't be assertive by saying, no, I don't want to go and not go.
Right. Thank you, Jason. You highlighted the value directed action, which is like, why are you going? Right. To just really take ownership of, well, this is why I want to go, instead of going, I'm only going because I'm being made to go. And if I don't go, my partner's going to be upset.
Or you have the thought, well, my partner won't feel like I love them if I don't go. And if you're feeling resentment even about that, you might start becoming passive aggressive.
And I think that would be a bigger topic to have if you're making conditions on where if your partner does or doesn't do something, it means they love you or they don't love you. That is making your love very conditional and testing the relationship in these very XYZ way.
Right. And we have another podcast on that topic, so always feel free to check that out. I think another thing to show here is what do you do about it? Right. So as an individual, I can try to pay attention when I'm being passive aggressive and try to switch to assertive communication. That would be important, right? Try to watch it. And if it comes out, to apologize. I know sometimes I don't even catch it myself when I do it. And was it a couple months ago or something? I was walking past Thaen and I said something and she goes, I think that was passive aggressive. And my immediate knee-jerk reaction was, no, it wasn't. And then I walked out of the room. I didn't get very far. And all of a sudden it just dawned on me as I processed the situation. I went, holy crap, I was passive aggressive. I turned around, I went back in and I said, you're right. I was passive aggressive there. Sometimes we don't catch it. And so even if you don't catch it in the moment, if you catch it afterwards when you're processing, it's okay to go back and apologize and try to get assertive at that point. But normally passive aggressive communication, either you, your partner, or both of you are not going to feel good about it. So that's what you want to process when it's not feeling good in the conversation. Can identify what communication style was I doing?
I think naming it and being more self-aware about it is super helpful. I think the other thing is allowing the strength of the relationship to challenge the passive aggressive fear, right? So like, I think oftentimes it's what's not being said directly. And I think there's fear behind, or maybe just we're so used to talking this way, right? Maybe there's not fear, but I'm assuming there's fear under why we avoid more assertive, more honest, vulnerable conversations. So I think I would encourage couples, when you notice that you're being passive or passive aggressive, to challenge these thinking that if I don't go to my partner's party or this event for them, then they won't love me anymore. Challenge that. Honestly say, I don't want to go. Is that okay? Stay home and see what happens. So I think it's important for us to really, for the service of the relationship and to highlight the strengths that sometimes maybe it doesn't mean our partners don't love us and we don't show up, that this is not a retaliation or a consequence. It's just something that we think will happen.
Well, and I think you're highlighting something that's important there is not every single incident where someone uses passive aggressive or passive communication, but in a lot of circumstances, if you're using that communication or someone else's, they're probably actually operating from a negative core belief. And so that's that negative thought. Well, it's not even really a thought. It's just something inside the brain that says something negative about self, and then it filters out and projects outwards, and then we start communicating in these ways. But if you want to know more on that, again, we have another podcast on that topic. I think it's also important to know on what do you do if your partner is being passive aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're on the receiving end and you're noticing it and picking it up.
Yeah, and I think the best, most valuable tip to that is stay assertive. Just like the example when I was passive aggressive a little while ago, and all you did is you just said, Jason, I think you're being passive aggressive there. Right? That was assertive. In the moment, because I didn't think I was like, oh, but it was reality. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to process it for a second. But that was assertive. It just kind of called it out and identified it.
Right. I don't even think I felt any elevation in my own mood. I didn't feel reactive. I was just like, oh, I named it. And I wasn't wanting to fight. I wasn't trying to correct you. I wasn't trying to be defensive about what I saw. I just stated it. And yeah, you came back and you're like, oh, you're right. Like thought nothing of it. But yes, so for folks who are noticing that your partners are being passive aggressive, just calling it out in a gentle way. I'm not saying going in there and say, "Oh, well that's passive aggressive and that's wrong and you're the bad guy in this
Right.
relationship."
Well,
Like,
that moved to aggressive.
right. Some people do weaponize language, right? And so we want to really be careful that when we're learning about these things, we are also being kind and giving grace, especially when we're talking about marriage and couples and partnership. And so I do add that caveat that when we do this with kindness and we do this in a neutral way when we're calling folks in.
Yeah, it's remembering that it is most likely that if your partner does do passive aggressive communication, from guilt trips to manipulation, gaslighting, there's a chance they have no idea they're doing it. It's just a reactionary thing happening in their mind, and their brain's been trained to just respond this way and to react this way. And so they're just doing it out of a reaction of the mind. They're just not aware. Now, that's not all situations. There are people that do it purposely, but a lot of times people it's just a way they learn to communicate, or a reactionary state.
Yeah, I think Jason is usually very good, honey, when I'm being kind of beating around the bush or there's a topic I haven't quite like solidify clarity in my own mind or decision making that sometimes you'll just ask me questions that will help me get to a place of, okay, that's my decision, right? Be something of like dinner. Oh, well, I want like Asian versus like Mexican for dinner or something. And you kind of know I'm not quite decisive, but then I want to go with Mexican because I know you love Mexican, but then I feel the pull to go to have an Asian taste for my mouth for dinner, like, and then you'll just like be really patient with me and you'll just ask me more questions.
And that is definitely the second tip I would give to anybody that has someone that's doing passive aggressive communication to you, is just get curious.
Mm-hmm.
Just notice. If they're doing passive aggressive communication, there's something under that. So you can say things like, well, can you tell me more about what you mean by that? I'm not fully understanding.
Yeah, just even I think noticing the ambivalence in your partner is helpful.
Well, I do want to clarify your example was passive, not passive aggressive.
Right, because I wasn't sure what I was wanting and I wasn't trying to sway you or dissuade you in any way.
Right. But so both situations can be helpful to just get curious, whether it's passive or passive aggressive. But sometimes passive aggressive, it's hard to be curious because it hurts, doesn't feel good. So if you can stay kind of centered where you can recognize something's happening in this other individual to make them feel like they need to be passive aggressive, if you can do that, getting curious can be very helpful. Again, because what you're asking for is what's behind this. So someone saying something like, always have to do the dishes, and just saying, whoa, like what's going on here? What's happening with you right now? It seems like you're upset. So getting curious, trying to see if they can explain themselves, because if they can, you might help them move to assertive communication. So third tip I often give people, and this one comes with a very, very huge caution to use it, because you are starting to go down the road of using passive aggressive to deal with passive aggressive. So the tip is, and again, be careful with this one, is you treat the tone like it doesn't exist. You treat the passive aggressive like it's not there. So, for example, we had the person that says, yeah, my wife made me come. So you would ignore the tone and you would just say, oh my gosh, it's so awesome that you did come. I value it so much and appreciate it. Or, like, for example, my mom was pretty good at guilt trips when I was younger. Not so much now, but when I was younger, she'd pull one out here and there. And one time I was sitting in the front room and it dawned on me what was happening when she said something along the lines of, I've been in the kitchen all day and now I have to take out the trash too, because she had asked me and I hadn't gotten to it because I was being a typical teenager watching a show or playing a game or whatever. And all I said is, thanks, Mom. And what ended up happening is once I started realizing the guilt trips and responding that way, my mom moved to assertive communication after that and started saying, Jason, you didn't take the garbage out. Come take it out. So it comes with a huge caution if you take this tip.
I
Okay.
can see where the caution comes from because this person could feel pretty dismissed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's playing with fire. It can be effective. It can be helpful, but it can come with some pretty big side effects too.
Yeah, I think the complexity of if you don't want to address the elephant in the room, I'm going to play along with you, but this person can get their feelings even further hurt by playing it that way, I would say. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever used it that way, but hearing you say it, I do see the caution of it's kind of like borderline trying to use humor and like chipperness to put a pen in it, but not talk about it, right? For me, I prefer the traditional, let's name it and let's talk about it.
Oh, hands down,
Mhm.
right? I would always encourage people to try the assertive approach, try the curiosity approach first. That is by far the most profound way to do it, the most effective. And it's the way that with the least amount of side effects.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I see I'm like processing it in real time right now. And I can see where why you meant it borderline passive aggressiveness, right? Because instead of saying that, I would say, well, Jason, why wouldn't we just say, it's obvious this is bugging you. Let's talk about this when we get home. Instead of going, yep, and I so appreciate you coming. It's
Yes, it's using that passive aggressive to fight passive aggressive. You know, and way back when I got trained in therapy, I don't think I'd even give this tip. And you are looking at me right now like, why are you giving this tip? And as much as I don't like to talk about too much, I lived with this. For 13 years, I was married to someone that was passive aggressive. It sucked. I tried the assertive approach, got me nothing. I tried the curiosity approach. It worked sometimes, but it just kept going and going. And I'll admit, it got to a
mm,
point where what else do you do? And so when I started taking this approach, it would at least shut the conversation down
mm,
and it would cause the person to rethink what they were doing. It forced them to have a different approach with me if they wanted some kind of response with me.
yeah. Usually, like really making them sit in their discomfort and not getting what they want without like having some self-preservation for you
Yeah.
in that sense. I can see that a little bit better now. And I would say maybe a lot of people can relate to your situation where you've tried all these other tactics and maybe this is kind of the last one.
Yeah. And that's why I give a huge caution to it whenever I give this tip. It is not the one I would say run to first. I would really encourage you to try the other tips first. But
For at least 15 years
yes, 15 years
before you
first.
try the third one.
But, the other one, at some point, it's like you get to a place where it's like, what do I do? I've tried these different things, and this can be your last resort to try for your own preservation and sanity, and it can work with some side effects.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad we were able to just kind of explore that too. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing a little bit more about when you chose to use that last tip.
It was effective. But, we ended up divorced, so I don't know. Got the outcome we're looking for, so. But it did make me a little more sane. So again, just kind of wrapping things up, there's the 4 styles of communication. There's assertive, passive, aggressive, passive, aggressive. When we are passive aggressive, it can start fracturing relationships, causing damage, resentment, frustration, anger. It can make our partner feel like they're walking on eggshells. And if it's happening to us, it can do all those things to us.
Yeah, let's not forget, it can start to make our inner negative thoughts sound, believable, even more believable. I'm not lovable. He doesn't care about me. I'm not worthy.
So it's often like Thaen's saying, it comes from negative beliefs, and it normally comes from reactive states. It comes from a place of kind of like a defensiveness. You feel like you got to fight, but you feel like you can't openly fight. So watch out for it because it can damage relationships. If it's happening, try to shift and move to assertive communication. Apologize when you do it. If it's happening to you, we'd always encourage you to be assertive with your partner. Be curious with your partner. And if you're at your wit's end, like I was at one point in my life, you can use what I said. You ignore the tone. You treat it like they meant it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the trash out for the 1,000th time. I think one thing I like to re-highlight from our discussion that really, I think for me, I'm walking away from the conversation feeling a little bit refreshed in my mind is using these moments of opportunity to be more honest and as ways to connect, but challenging the conditional parts that our negative beliefs are telling us, right? That if I don't go, then X, Y, and Z, right? If they don't do this, then X, Y, and Z. So, really understanding and stopping to check, am I making something conditional right now? And if I am, what is that? Can I be honest about how I feel about this situation and also make a compromise, but highlighting the value of what I'm getting out of it or how I'm supporting my partner instead of I don't want to go and I'm still going. So I think those are the two kind of like things that made me open my eyes to go, yes, this is the connection we're talking about. This is the connection before the correction that needs to happen in moving forward with passive aggressive communication, calling it out, highlighting it, naming it, trying to move through it when we get stuck in that place.
Yeah, and I loved what you actually said earlier is if your partner does do this and you are going to call it out, do it in a way that's not judgmental or mean or aggressive. You talked about recognize they're human, right? It comes from a place that they might just be being reactive. It's something that's just happening with this person. And we didn't talk about this, and I won't go deep on it, but always remember the pause. If you haven't heard that episode yet, remember pausing a conversation can be a very healthy thing. So if you see your partner's really reactive, they're using passive aggressive communication, and you do say, hey, it feels like you're being passive aggressive, or, this doesn't feel good. And if they continue, it's okay to say, I'm going to pause the conversation here and step away. So just remember, you can always do that. If you found this session helpful, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real conversations about mental health, happiness, and how we keep going even when life gets tangled. Until next time, keep showing up, stay curious, and remember, the mess is the method.